الرحيم الحمد لله الذي قصرت عن رؤيته أبصار الناظرين وعجزت عن نعته أوهام الواصفين الحمد لله رب العالمين الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين وبالقاسم محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وأهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد أما بعد فقد قال الله تبارك وتعالى وقوله الحق وهو أصدق القائلين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا أيتها النفس المطمئنة ارجعي إلى ربك راضية مرضية فادخلي في عبادي وادخلي جنتي صدق الله العلي العظيم. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Continuing with this series of Majlis, tonight is the fourth lecture and third in this under the topic which we have chosen to discuss in these nights under these last four verses from Surah Fajr, chapter number 89 from Quran, in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is addressing a satisfied soul, a soul which is at peace, a serene soul, whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala calls upon Himself to return in the state when Allah is Radi and the soul is Radi from Allah, to be among His servants and eventually enter into His paradise. We've been discussing these verses, and every day we talk a little bit of the tafsir and the tatbiq of these ayat. And we concluded, or we discussed last night in regards to the beginning of this chapter, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is swearing by the dawn. He said, wal fajr wa layalin ashr wa shaf'i wal watr, that by the dawn and by the 10 nights, the odd and the even. And so we talked about how Mufassireen have done the mutabiqat of these verses by saying that these 10 nights are actually being referred towards the first 10 nights of Muharram. And similarly, this nafs mutma'in is being referred to none other than Imam Hussein alayhi salatu wasalam. Yesterday, if you remember, we addressed the concept of itminan, and we mentioned how some of the verses of Quran do the tafsir of other verses. And it's very simple concept. If you were to go ahead and look at the key words in this particular ayah, and then use the same words which has appeared somewhere else in Quran, you can deduce the meaning and you can get some sort of understanding of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying. And therefore, this is one of the methods of doing the tafsir of Quran, through other verses of Quran. Another common method which is used to do the tafsir of Quran is by looking at the ahadith from Masumeen alayhim salatu wasalam, because on numerous occasions when their companions asked them about the ta'wil and the tafsir and the tatbiq of these verses of Quran, Aimma Athar explained it to them. And therefore, hadith becomes our second source in deducing the meaning of the verses of Quran. Because this Quran is not revealed to a dead nation. This Quran is revealed to a nation which is alive. But unfortunately, we use this Quran only on our deceased and not on those who are alive. What is the purpose of this Quran? To recite Surah Yasin from it when someone passes away. To recite Surah Fatiha or Surah Qul Huwallah on the departed soul. Or to use this Quran and put it at the highest possible place in your house because of respect, obviously, but also so that nobody can touch it. And it sits there with sand and dust getting on top of it so you can do tayammum. Where are you going to find sand and dust for tayammum? Malana, we need to do tayammum sometimes. Look it up on top of the Quran. Hopefully that's not the case. So, we have abandoned this Quran. Had it not been the case, we would not have this ayat in Quran. Rasulullah complaining on the Day of Judgment. Inna qawmi ittakhadhu hadha al-Qur'ana mahjura. O my Lord, my people abandoned this Quran. My discussion is not about Quran just because, the discussion came about a few words so that we can get ourselves closer to this book of Allah. It's not that hard to understand with the methodology that has been mentioned, with the tafsir that is available, with the translations and the variety of translations that are available. So do not leave this Quran. In fact, our fourth Imam Zayn al-Abidin alayhi salatu wasalam said, if everything in the east and the west was to perish, and I had nothing but this Quran in my hand, I will not have any loneliness, none whatsoever. This would be enough for me. So we'll make sure that we get in the habit of reading this Quran. We make sure that we become on those who are the reciters of Quran. And then eventually we become those who are the ponderers of Quran, who ponder over this book and understand what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this Kalam Hakim, is discussing. And you understand that, when we talk about how angels used to come down to the doorstep of Janab Sayyidah, it's a common understanding that angels used to come down to her door to pay respect. And a lot of time people have a hard time understanding that concept. So how is it possible for the angels to come on other than Rasulullah? They used to come on Rasul to deliver the message of Allah, but other than Allah, it doesn't really make sense. Amir al-Mu'mineen gives us a formula by which if you want, angels will come down to your doorstep as well. Forget about Masoom. Imam talks about it, mentions it in a beautiful hadith in which he says that this Quran, إن البيت الذي يقرأ فيه القرآن ويذكر الله عز وجل, house in which Quran is recited and Allah is remembered. There are some results of that. يَحْضُرُهُ الْمَلَائِكَةِ, Malaika are present over there. وَيَحْجُرُهُ الشَّيَاطِينَ, Shayateen remain away from it. وَتَكْثُرُ بَرَكَاتِ, Barakat increase in this house. These are some of the effects of reciting Quran and remembering Allah. But then Imam mentioned the other part of the hadith as well. وَإِنَّ الْبَيْتَ الَّذِي لَا يقرأ فيه القرآن ولا يذكر الله عز وجل فيه. House in which Quran is not recited and house in which Allah is not remembered, barakat decrease, shayateen make way to it, and angels stay away from this house. We don't want that house. We want the first part of the house, or the first type of the house. Imam continues by saying, you know the house in which Quran is recited? What kind of house that is? He said, يُضِيءُ لِأَهْلِ السَّمَاءِ كَمَا تُضِيءُ الْكَوَاكِبْ لِأَهْلِ الْأَرْضِ. This house illuminates and brightens for the people of Ahlus Sama, of the heavens, the same way the stars are illuminated for the people in the earth. When you look up onto the skies and you see the stars are illuminated, he said, when the inhabitants of heavens look down, these houses in which Quran is recited, they are illuminated. So make sure we don't squander this opportunity. This book which is between us, it's revealed for us, not for other nations to ponder over it and deduce laws from it and deduce other things from it. And when they have deduced from it, we go out and say, well, yes, it is already said in Quran, it was already mentioned in Quran 1400 years ago. Salawat bi Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So yesterday, we were talking about how, when you look at these verses of Quran, when you attain this itminan, how do you attain this itminan? By doing the dhikr of Allah. How do you do the dhikr of Allah? أقم الصلاة للذكر, by performing this salat. And we went into discussion of salat of Imam Hussein, and how that was the focal point of the whole battle as well. That Imam did not neglect that. We see that what is the salat in reality? I think we had enough discussion about it, but just a few more points about it. Inshallah, we'll move forward with more messages from Ashura. Today we want to talk about the ethical messages from Ashura. But just a few words in regards to the salat so we can wrap up this topic. That the salat, what is it? Do we know the reality of the salat? Why do we perform 5 times a day? Why do we stand in the way that we stand? And what is it that we're saying and why we're repeating it? Well, if you look at it, when our Prophet Hazrat Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alayhi wa when he ascended to Miraj, he was shown different heavens, he met different Anbiya, he had a conversation with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The whole conversation had been documented. Obviously when Prophet came back, he narrated the whole thing. And so it was documented. Interestingly, if you look at this whole conversation, which is mentioned in various books, especially in Irshad al-Daylami, narrates the whole hadith by the name of Hadith al-Miraj. In fact, some of our ulama and scholars of ethics have done tashri' and commentary of Hadith al-Miraj. It's such an interesting hadith. It's a lengthy hadith, but it's an interesting hadith which has so many ethical points in it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala addresses our Prophet with Ahmad. So we understand that his name on the arsh of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Ahmad. His name on the ground is Muhammad. His name over there is Ahmad.
Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
And he said, Ya Ahmad, hal tadri? Oh Ahmad, do you know? Ya Ahmad, hal ta'arif? Oh Ahmad, do you have this knowledge? And obviously Prophet has all the knowledge that Allah has given to him. But when he's standing in front of Allah, being asked by Allah, do you know this? Prophet replied by saying, La. Whatever knowledge I have is from you, but not beyond that. Whatever you have given, I know. But that which you haven't given to me, I don't know. We might raise some eyebrows over here saying, how is it possible that Prophet not knows some things? Well, in Surah Jinn, when people asked Prophet about the day of judgment, he said, In Adri, I do not know that this day is near or far away. So Prophet in Quran is also admitting the fact that there are certain things that I might not have the knowledge of. That does not decrease anything from the status that I have. After Allah, I have the most amount of knowledge. But my knowledge is not same as the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's a mistake that we should not make. We should not place Prophet right next to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in horizontal way. Vertically, yes, the knowledge of Allah, knowledge of Prophet, and knowledge of Ma'asumeen. Vertically speaking, yes, it's fine. When you put it in the horizontal line, that's where the problem arises. So Allah, there are a lot of things that He kept hidden, even from Rasulullah. He did not mention. And so in this hadith, we see the manifestation of that. Allah asks him question, "O Prophet, do you know this? O Prophet, do you know this?" And obviously, when the tone of the discussion is, "Do you know this?" is to inform. And in reality, you and I are being informed. It's kind of like when you look at the adiyya and the supplications of Ma'asumeen. For example, in Dua Kumail, we read, Amir al-Mu'mineen, what does he say? He said, Ya Allah, ighfir kulla dhanbin adnabtu. O Allah, forgive all of my sins that I have committed. Kulla khatiyatin akhta'tuha. All the mistakes that I have made, O Allah, forgive. Imam, we consider you Masoom. What mistakes and sins are you talking about over here? So definitely there are no mistakes and sins on part of Imam. But it's a method of making dua in the bargah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And in reality, he's teaching us how to speak to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's why one of the methods and the reasons of reciting the dua in Arabic, yes, you should read the translation to understand what you're saying. Because if you make dua and not know what you're saying, that's another problem. You should know what you're asking for. But make sure that you recite it in Arabic. Why? Because that's the proper method of speaking to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Masoom has taught us that. So Prophet was asked a question, "O Prophet, هل تعرف بأي وقت يتقرب العبد من الله?" O Prophet, do you know what is the time when my servant is closest to me? Prophet said, "La, tell me, O Allah." Allah replied by saying, when he is in the form of sajidan or ja'i'an. When this servant is sajid, when he's performing the salat, and when he's empty stomach, when he's fasting. So in the month of Ramadan, or whenever outside of the month of Ramadan, you're fasting and you're in the halat of sajda, that is the closest that you can get to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Again, we're not talking about qurbate batani or qurbate zahiri, not the physical closeness. Rather, we're talking about the spiritual closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this was a conversation that was happening. Prophet comes back. A lot of time I have a hard time believing as the Prophet actually even went to Mi'raj. But nonetheless, after having convinced some people, they asked Prophet, "What did you see over there?" Prophet mentions, "I saw this, I met this Anbiya, these Anbiya, I met in fact all of the Anbiya, and I did this, I saw that." A detailed account of what he saw. Right away people said, "Oh Prophet, we want to go there as well. We want to travel to Mi'raj as well." Sort of like when you go for a trip and you come back from your trip abroad and you tell your children that, I saw that. I saw, I don't know, you went to South America, you saw Amazon, I don't know, you saw something interesting and you come back and you explain it in details. Seeing it on TV is another, hearing it from another person who has seen and visited that place, or you've gone to Makkah and Medina. You come back, we've seen Makkah so many times in our lives, we've seen Medina so many times in our lives on TV, but those who have witnessed it in real life, when they come back and tell you, you have an interest to listening to what they're saying. Right away, your desire is what? I want to go visit as well. I want to go see that place as well. It's a majestic place. Similar request was made by these people. "Oh Prophet, we want to perform this Mi'raj as well. How can we do this Mi'raj? How can we go on this Mi'raj?" Prophet said, "You don't have to make an effort to go to this Mi'raj. Allah has prepared a Mi'raj for you. As-salatu mi'rajul mu'min." Namaz is the Mi'raj of mu'min. What was I doing in Mi'raj? I was speaking to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He's giving you this opportunity right here. On this land, when you perform salat 5 times a day, you're actually engaging in the conversation with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You don't need to go up there to make this Mi'raj. No. Your Mi'raj is right here. let's now look at our Mi'raj. How do we take care of this Mi'raj when we stand up to perform the namaz? We're in a rush. We want to get it off our shoulders, our neck right away. And, we're tired. We'll just go ahead and pray. And so on and so forth. Hazrat Musa, alayhi salatu wasalam, when Allah speaks to him, He asked him a question. This is in Surah Taha. وَمَا تِلْكَ بِيَمِينِكَ يَا مُوسَى. Oh Musa, what are you holding in your hand? First of all, Allah does not need to know. It's not a question of ignorance. It's a question that Allah is asking him something so that he can explain what he does with it. So he understands what Allah has given to him and he knows how to properly use it. He could have just replied by saying, this is a staff, it's a cane, you had given it to me. What does he reply by saying? When Allah says, Ya Musa, وَمَا تِلْكَ بِيَمِينِكَ يَا Musa. He said, هَذَا أَصَايَ أَتَوَكَّأُ عَلَيْهَا وَأَهُشُّ بِهَا عَلَى غَنَمِي وَلِيَ فِيهَا مَعَارِبُ أُخْرَى. This is my staff, my cane, my asa. I, lean upon it, I rest upon it, I use it for my, obviously animal and the herd and, taking my animals around, I use it for that. And, I have other things that I can use it for. On and on and on and on. Oh Musa, it's a simple question. If I asked you a question, what's in your pocket? What's in your wallet? What's in your hand? You say, it's a tasbih in my hand. You don't start counting, what are the things that you can do with this tasbih. You just say it's a tasbih. It's a simple question and it's a simple answer. First of all, why Allah needs to ask this, we already explained that. But oh Musa, خَيْرُ الْكَلَامِ قَلَّ وَدَلْ. The best conversation or kalam is that which is little, concise, and has proof in it. You don't have to go into the details. Hazrat Musa will reply by saying, yeah, but I don't want to squander the opportunity to speak to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He's asked me a question. Yes, it's a simple question. But I want to make sure that I prolong this conversation. I want to make sure that I can prolong this conversation to as far as possible so that I remain engaged in this conversation with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is where we need to realize, brothers and sisters, how important this salat is. Not just merely utterance of some adiyyah, some du'as, some surahs, and then being done with it. No, look at it from the aspect that you're standing in the bargah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and you're speaking to Him one-on-one directly. And that is indeed an honor that is given to each and every single one of us when we stand in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Salawat bi Muhammad wa So one of the messages that we learn from, or the ethical messages that we learn from Ashura. So we divided in the first day different categories of the messages that we derive from Ashura. One of the messages that we derive from Ashura is the ethical messages. Ethics is actually part of the threefold formula that is part of every Muslim and mu'min's life. There are three things. One is in the form of the akhlaq, which is this ethics. Second is in the form of the ahkam that we deal with. Third is in the form of the aqaid that we have. These three things give us the formula to completely practice our religion. If you only practiced, the wajibat, which are part of ahkam, and you lacked akhlaq, or if you only had the beliefs, the wahdaniyat of Allah, the adl of Allah, the nubuwwat and imamat and the qiyamat and so on and so forth, and you lacked akhlaq, it will be a very difficult combination for it to be accepted in the bargah of Allah. So therefore akhlaq become very, very important. That's why we see books written by ulama akhlaq talking about these traits that exist. Among those traits in akhlaq that we learn from Ashura is the trait of freedom. Sayyid al-Shuhada, our Imam, was the leader of those who were free or those who were fighting towards freedom. It is very hard for us to understand as to what freedom is. If we pay attention a little bit, that this is a trait which everyone holds closely and dear to themselves. In fact, anyone who has any amount of humanity in them, they're willing to sacrifice many things in order for them to remain free and not go under anyone's influence. You would rather remain hungry than to be a slave of another individual to be provided food. And therefore, the concept of freedom comes into play as to, are we physically free or are we mentally free? Just being physically free does not give you or make you free. Mentally also, you need to be free. I want to share a few words of wisdom over here by our Imam al-Muhammad wa For example, there was an incident in the time of our seventh Imam when he was walking past a house. And in that house, the sound of music was coming. Imam stopped, knocked on the door. A lady came and opened the door. Imam asked that lady, the owner of this house, is he a free person or free man, or is he a slave? She right away replied by saying, no, he's free. Back then, there was slavery. He said, he's free. Imam said, I wished he was a slave. Imam walked away. When that lady went inside, her master asked, who was at the door? What took you so long? He said, there was a person. He came and he asked this question. And right away I replied by saying, no, my master is free. This person realized who was at the door. He ran outside of the house barefoot. That's why his name became Bishr Hafi. Hafi, the one who did not have any shoes on. He ran after Imam, got close to Imam, and asked for apology and asked for forgiveness. Imam said, if you were really the servant of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Imam was not saying free in the sense that you're free from another person's influence. Free from these things which are in your surrounding. Free from being under the influence of those who have some sort of influence upon you. Because you were under the influence of another individual, this music was coming from your house. And if you were really the servant of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you would really be considered a free man. Being servant of Allah is being free from another person's influence. And this is what Imam al-Islam is also portraying to us in the land of Karbala. What does Imam say? Imam says this. He said, Mautun fi izzin khayrun min hayatin fi dhullin. He said, death with honor is better to me, dearer to me than hayat in dalalat. And hayat in disgrace, under someone's influence. And that too, such as a person as Yazid over here. I would rather sacrifice myself than live in this world. So Imam is actually giving us the concept of being free. Here, people might say, if Islam is so much about freedom, then why this slavery existed, or why this concept of slavery still is discussed in the fiqh of Islam. So you look, the katharas today, and you look at the book of Tawzi'ul Masail, which is very difficult for many of us to read as it is. But you look up the kafara, the first kafara for having broken the fast is what? To free a slave, which is no longer possible. We don't have any slaves. So the concept of slavery is still there. Why, when we talk about that Islam came to eradicate slavery, why slavery still is talked so much about in Islam? And how come Islam did not end it right away? Let it be practiced. There's very simple understanding if you can realize that. Islam actually did come to eradicate slavery. But it was a widespread practice which cannot be eradicated overnight. It was deeply inside the practices of the people who lived at that time in Arabia. So when Islam came, when there were these captives of war, obviously, what do you do with these captives? Usually the wars that we have these days, what happens? These people who get captives or what? You bring them and you put them into the prisons. Back then, Islam is very, very fragile. It's the initial days of Islam. You have to go into Battle of Badr. You have to go into Battle of Uhud. And there are certainly some captives that are coming back. When these captives come back, you have multiple choices. What do you do with them? You either set them free. That's wrong. Why? Because they'll revolt against you. You just capture them. You can't just release them. Second, establish these cells and prisons and put them there, and use taxpayers' money to, educate them or provide food for them and provide living for them. Islam doesn't have money at that time. It's going through a very fragile state. The third option was to give one of these captives to these Muslimin to take home with themselves. Use them for their housework and at the same time teach them Islamic values. And every time you committed something such as broke a fast, broke a qasam or an oath, what do? Go ahead and free a slave. So this was actually a very logical solution to continue this, but at the same time eradicate it and alleviate it from the society, which was deeply rooted in this concept of slavery. Salawat Nabi Muhammad. So we see that how is it related to us? How is it affecting us? We're not slaves. We're not slaves of anyone. We are completely free. I'm not under the influence of anyone. MashaAllah, I'm living in this world, in this society, in this part of the world, and I can practice my religion freely. I can do anything I want. I have freedom of speech, I have freedom of this, I have freedom of that. We wish we had all of these freedoms. They're just there on the paper, but we wish we had all these freedoms. But on another note, from the ethical aspect, because remember, it's an ethical value that Imam is teaching us. We look at how it affects us. How easily we go under the influence of others. The sooner we go under the influence of another individual, we have lost our freedom. How many of us give in so easily at those requests which are unlawful? I'm not talking about lawful requests. Your child comes to you, asks for something lawful, that's not going under his influence or whatnot. That's not losing your freedom. We're talking about unlawful requests. Yes. Even from our family members sometimes, we give in so easily and we lose our freedom. I'll read one ayat in front of you. This is from Surah Tawbah, verse number 24. Verse 24, I urge all of you, tonight when you go home, if you can remember, Tawbah 24. Go home, write it down, read it. If you have a tafsir, look into the tafsir of it as well. Because over here I won't have a great deal of time to explain it. But I'll read the ayat. Ayat says this, قُلْ إِنْ كَانَ آبَاؤُكُمْ وَأَبْنَاؤُكُمْ وَإِخْوَانُكُمْ وَأَزْوَاجُكُمْ وَعَشِيرَتُكُمْ وَأَمْوَالٌ اقترفتموها وتجارة تخشون كسادها ومساكن ترضونها أحب إليكم من الله ورسوله وجهاد في سبيله فتربصوا حتى يأتي الله بأمره والله لا يهدي القوم الفاسقين. قل, O Prophet, tell them, if your forefathers, if your children, if your brothers, if your spouses, if your relatives, and if that mal, that wealth that you have accumulated, that trade that you have performed, those houses in which you live and you are radi with them, are more dear to you than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or His apostle or struggle in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, فَتَرَبَّصُوا, then wait for the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to come upon you. What does this ayat tell us? I don't think it left out any of our family members. Talked about the forefathers, grandparents, talked about brothers, sisters, relatives, spouses, houses that we have, the wealth that we possess. Allah says, if all of those things are more dear to you than Allah, His Prophet, and struggle in the way of Allah, then wait for the decree of Allah. What are some of the examples? I'll share a few examples so we can make sense of this ayat. Again, ayat of Quran need tafsir for us to understand. We can't just read the ayat of Quran and understand it right away. One or two examples of it. For example, a spouse says to the husband, what is this beard that you have growing on your face? Remove it. Or if a child grows a beard, for example, right away the elders, you're young right now, you don't need, just live your life right now. What with the beard, are you becoming Maulana? A child or if a youth starts coming to masjid to perform the namaz on daily and regular basis, what is wrong with you? You go to masjid, Maulanas don't even go to masjid that much, that you're going to masjid so much. Or the spouses ask their wives, for example, I don't like this hijab. You can put it on your head, but in a way that it's not really hijab, or half of it is a hijab, or half of it is not hijab, or whatever the means or whatever the ways it might be. Right away you're forcing another to do something which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not approve, which ma'asumeen don't approve, which shariat does not approve. And there could be many examples of such. For example, especially it comes in play, I'm an outsider, so I can just say these things and leave. Then Maulanas over here will deal with it. That, especially in the weddings, a lot of time we have to ask, should we come to the wedding? Or should we not come to the wedding? Maulana, there will be some music there. And it will be a mixed gathering, so, it will not be appropriate for you to come. So when you can't even invite the alim of your community, how do you expect the imam to come to the wedding? When you are inviting and writing the names of the list of invitees, the first name should be Imam Zaman. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. We're going through a list of people whom we're going to invite. First name should be Imam of your time. And then make sure that you have a setting where Imam of your time can come in, is able to come in. We go under pressure. Maulana, the ladies, they want to do functions. It's only, once in life, and there's only one daughter, there's only one son. So because there's only one daughter, there's only one son, we're going to go everything that is haram. And then, inshallah, we'll make tawbah afterwards. And I'm not saying one gender is responsible for this. Both are. And you see sometimes men become so, weak. They're like, Maulana, what can we do? You're the man of the house. Go ahead and take some charge. In other areas, you have charge. Over here, you have nothing to say. No, we don't have anything to say. So these are some of the examples, brothers and sisters. Without going into further details, we understand. What is this ayat saying of Surah Tawbah 24? If you listen to your fathers, your brothers, your sisters, your spouses, your relatives, you worried about your house, you worried about your wealth, or what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, what Rasul is saying, and the struggle in the way of Allah is saying, then fatarabbasu. Wait for the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to decide what is going to happen to you. And then we'll take care of it. So this is where we need to go ahead and realize and come out. And this is what Imam Hussain ﷺ, especially in this context when we look at, he's teaching us the ultimate lesson of being hur, ultimate lesson of being free from all of these calamities. So Adi Muhammad wa just realized that I ran out of my time. But when we are talking about freedom, and there's many things that could be said about freedom, azadi. There was a person in the army of Imam who joined at the very last moments by the name of Hur, to whom Imam actually said, when Imam reached him, picked up his head when he was breathing his last breath, that your mother was correct in naming you Hur. And the Hurrun fi dunya, you are Hur in this life and in the hereafter. And it's a strange story of Hazrat Hur. We heard a couple of days ago as well, in I think Urdu Majlis, how Hur was the one whose army had come to Imam to stop his path from where Imam was headed, to not let him go to Kufa. But Imam, when he saw these people come, these men come, they were thirsty. Right away Imam told Jawanan Banu Hashim to prepare water. And he provided water to Hur and his men, as well as the horses. And then, this is where Imam is building character. He knows who will have effect and who will not have effect. He knows Hur has that element. In fact, Hur himself said that when I was leaving Kufa, and I was given the charge to go ahead and stop Imam where he was, and bring him to, where I was ordered by Ibn Ziyad. Initially it was to bring him to Kufa, wherever I was ordered by Ibn Ziyad. He said, I was leaving and I heard a voice, Hur, glad tidings towards paradise. He turned around. He said, I'm going to have glad tidings towards paradise, basharat of paradise, when I'm going to stop the path of Nawasi Rasul, the grandson of Rasul. He said, I did not realize that. He comes, Imam ﷺ knows what to say to him. He said, oh, now that you have drank water, we're going to go ahead and perform salah. You go pray your own namaz, we'll pray our own. Right away, Hur said, Imam, when you are here, how dare do I leave salat? We're going to pray behind you. This is the second arrow that Imam sends towards Hur. He performed salat behind Imam. After salat was done, Imam gets up on his horse and he wants to continue his journey. Hur held the reins of the horse. Imam did not remind him. He could have easily said to Hur, Hur, I just provided water to you. Wasn't I the one who gave water to your caravan and to your animals? He could have easily bragged about it. But Imam is Saqi ibn Saqi, son of Ali and Batul, is not going to remind and brag and boast about what he has given to someone. Imam said one thing though. ثَقَلَتْكَ أُمَّكَ مَا تُرِيدُ. May your mother sit in your grief. What are you doing? What do you want? This was the third arrow that Imam threw towards Hur. Right away Hur replies by saying, Oh Hussein, if it was someone else who had said this, my izzat and honor, I would have replied back in the same way. Nobody talks about mother, or especially my mother, like that. And I would have replied back to that person in the same way. But what do I do that your mother is Fatmatul Zahra? I know that your mother is Fatmatul Zahra, daughter of Rasulullah. I cannot repeat the same words to you. This was the third arrow. Imam said, all right. So they continued on a path which was neither towards Kufa nor towards Makkah. And they ended up being in Karbala. But these words that Imam had said were sticking with Hur every step of the way. From 2nd of Muharram up until the day of Ashur, these were the words that were echoing and reverberating in the head of Hur. He was sitting down, he was laying, he was trying to get some sleep, he would not fall asleep. He would get up and come out of his tent. He'll come out of the tent, he could not bear to see the scene, he'll go back into his tent. Someone said, oh Hur, I haven't seen you in this condition. If someone was to ask me who's the biggest warrior in all of Kufa, without a doubt I would say Hur. But what is this that you're scared of merely 72 people who are not even equipped with all of the arsenal? Why are you so scared? I said, no, it's not about 72 people. When I come back into my tent, I hear the voices and the sounds of Al-Atash, Al-Atash. And I remind myself that I'm the one who stopped their path. They were the ones who provided water to me, and now I hear the voices of Al-Atash from their camps. This is the voice that is haunting me, that I cannot fall asleep. He said, "Oh, what has happened to you?" He said, "I see myself between Jahannam and Jannat. I have a choice actually, to choose between the two." And with the excuse of to provide water to his horse sides away from his dashra. As he's walking away, he sees someone is coming behind him. Who is it? It's his own son, Ali ibn Hur. Father and son have conversation. Hur says, "I'm going back to ask forgiveness from Mawla. I'm the reason that I have brought him over here, that he has come over here. I'm the reason that he's suffering like this. Oh Father, take me with you as well." He said, "I will, but I have a favor to ask." Hur gives him a handkerchief and says, "Tie my hands." Son of Hur ties the hands of the father. He said, "I want to walk in front of my Mawla in a way so people understand that a sa'il, a beggar, is coming to me." Different riwayat mention, I'll go through very quickly. One riwayat that says that Imam knew who was coming. He orders the Jawanan and Banu Hashim, "Get up in reception to my friends, to reception to our guest." Hur comes, throws himself down. In certain riwayat, he remains up on his horse, asking Mawla to give permission to go ahead and sacrifice himself. But he says one thing, "Oh Mawla, have you forgiven me?" Without any delay, look at the way Imam ﷺ is speaking, without any delay, without reminding anything to Hur. Imam said, "Yes, I have forgiven you, and my Rabb has forgiven you." This is where forgiveness should be understood. Hur said, "Mawla, I ask forgiveness for having brought you over here. If it was in my hands, I could have let you go wherever you wanted to go. Oh Mawla, I'm sorry for having brought you over here, that your children are thirsty now." Imam knows that he had to come to Karbala. You were just the means to bringing me over here. Hur said, "Mawla, give me permission so that I can sacrifice myself unto you." Imam said, "Hur, this is not the riwayat of our house. This is not the way it works in our house. When a guest comes, we make sure we take care of them. But you have come at a time that we do not even have a drop of water to offer you. Ajrukum Allah, may Allah give you no grief except the grief of Ahl Muhammad." That he sees, Imam is asking him, Imam is telling him all of this. He said, "Oh Mawla, if you want to offer me something, let my son go ahead and sacrifice himself onto you." Imam says, "Everyone has to go. I'm not going to hold you back." He gives the permission to the son of Hur, Ali ibn Hur, to go ahead and sacrifice himself. He goes towards Maqtal. He fights the way his father used to fight. And after he was surrounded by the enemies, he comes down onto the ground. He calls upon his father, "Ya Abati, if you want to have the last look at your son, come for me, come to me." And upon hearing this, Hur gets up. He wants to go towards the Maqtal. Someone tells Mawla, Hur is headed towards the Maqtal. Imam goes up to Hur and says, "Oh Hur, what are you doing?" He said, "My son is calling me. I want to go to my help of my son." Imam said, "Oh Hur, you will not be able to see the pain. You will not be able to bear the pain, because it's a Jawan son, it's a young son of yours who's in his youth years. Oh Hur, it will be very difficult for you. Let me help you." Imam let Hur stay. Instead, Imam goes towards Maqtal, picks up the body of the young son of Hur, and he brings it back to the Qiyam. I want to ask Mawla, today you stopped Hur because his young son was martyred, and you helped him pick up the body, but later on, when your own son Ali Akbar will be killed, will be martyred, how will you pick up his body? Imam will go towards the body of Ali Akbar, and he will not be able to pick it up because of his old age. He will call upon the Jawanan and Banu Hashim, and come and help your Mawla. وَسَيَعْلَمُ الَّذِينَ ظَلَمُوا أَيَّ مُنْقَلَبٍ يَنْقَلِبُونَ.